another follow along routine. Today we're going to be filling in the kind of final missing piece of the routines that are on this channel. We kind of got routines for everything, but there is not a hip flexor specific routine. So we're going to go through a short, quick, nice, active flexibility routine focused on opening up the hips, in particular the hip flexors, and developing that hip extension. You are going to need some equipment for today's routine. I would highly recommend, as always, having a bolster, some yoga blocks, something to cushion yourself with things, but you're also going to want a foam roller. I'll explain to you why we want that one in a second. Let's jump into the routine. Before we jump into this routine, I kind of want to illustrate the use of the routine itself. So I thought I would quickly just demonstrate to you my front split here cold, and then I'm just going to compare at the end of the routine, just so you can see the difference that stretching the hip flexor makes. So let me just slide into, this is completely cold, sort of front split. So, you know, the fact that I'll be more warmed up will improve that, but generally not so bad. I'd expect this hip extension, this fundamental part of the front split, to improve quite a bit over the next 10 minutes or so. So we're going to kick things off with some foam rolling. Now, I'm going to start foam rolling. I'm going to talk to you why you want to do it. I would just, any foam roller is fine really in this instance. We're just going to focus a little bit on the quads, because the quads can lock down those hip flexors slightly. So we're just going to come forward into a plank position, start on whatever side you want. We're just going to spend about a minute per side, nothing too drastic. And we can just spend a little bit of time rolling up and down just the belly of the quad. Again, if you find any particular tender points, feel free to pause them very briefly, but sort of rotate around, moving the leg from internal to external rotation, so kind of moving the inner side of the thigh, outer side of the thigh, literally just a minute. Now, I'm actually not a massive fan of foam rolling, and there probably isn't any foam rolling in any of these follow-along videos. And I've kind of covered my thoughts based on the evidence out there, that it doesn't do much, but there is evidence that when coupled with stretching, it can produce some good effects. And I found that specifically with like the hip flexors, they tend to respond well to just a little bit of help. And so do the glutes as well. If you want to foam roll or do some soft tissue work to your glutes before doing some flexibility stuff, it can help quite a bit. It should be uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point, because then it makes everything we do afterwards a little bit more comfortable. Right, I'm just going to swap sides, so I'm going to move to my left leg, start on the right. Exactly the same thing, just relatively moderate pace, moving up and down the quad. You can go a little bit all the way up to the hip flexor if you want to. Yeah, it's just a pretty chilled way just to start off. I'm obviously not going to make any claims that we're breaking down adhesions or anything like that, because that's just not the case. We're not breaking down knots. We're just warming ourselves up for the suffering. Right, another 15 seconds or so on this leg, and then I'm going to kick off into this routine. Right, you can now put that foam roller to one side. And we're just going to come now into an upward dog position, just a nice kind of warm up position, not particularly intense. We can just shift a little bit from side to side, feel a stretch over the abdominals, over the hip flexors. And we're just going to do some breathing. Now when I say breathing, I don't mean chest breathing, I mean diaphragmatic breathing. So we're going to try and breathe into our belly into this position and feel sort of like the rib cage move. And just a little bit of stretch. We're going to shift back from this position just onto our knees now, and we're just going to warm up a little bit of that hip extension and kind of a little bit into the quads. So we're just going to place our hands behind us in this like supported position, and then from here we're just going to do some hip thrusts. So we're going to squeeze the glutes, try and push the hips up. Should feel a little bit of a stretch over the hip flexors and quads, and then come back down. So just going to hold each one for 2 or 3 seconds. Just going to do 5 of these. And also, whilst you're doing that, make sure you're pressing down, opening up the shoulders at the same time. If you can't sit comfortably doing this, you can always come onto the toes as well. But if you can do, keep the feet flat. And again, like the hand should be taking some of the weight anyway. So just 5 of these initially. That's the 5th one. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to actually start by stretching out the quads primarily. So to do that, we're actually going to do a standard hip quad stretch, but we're going to do it sat on the ground. So we're going to come into this sort of kneeling position with one leg straight, one leg bent. The thing with this one is, comfort again. So if, for example, you can't get your foot into this position, place a support underneath here, or even go lean onto the side more and place it onto your foot. But generally a cushion underneath there will kind of take away any issues that you have. From here, we're just going to try and lean backwards. So this is going to now create that stretch over the quad. But whilst doing that, we're also going to twist away to our right-hand side slightly. So we're not going to sit back into it. We're going to try and keep this heel hip into a line going diagonally across our body. So here we should feel a stretch over the quad, and we're going to try and squeeze this glute, press the hip up. And we're literally going to hold this position. If you can do, you can use this other leg just to kind of anchor down that knee. And then from here, we're just going to work on easing our way back into it. So you can start supported on the elbow, supported on the hands, but eventually you want to come to this like lying sort of position. But all the time, we're pushing the knee in this direction. We're squeezing the glute, pushing the hip up to get more extension over the hip and get some stretch over our quad. So we're just going to hold this position for like 60 seconds. We're going to play a little bit of like waiting out the tension. So we're looking for some tension to be created here. We're going to find ourselves in like a comfortable position that we can hold. And then we're just going to look for that tension over the quad to dissipate and just relax. So whilst doing that again, maintaining some just like comfortable breathing into the belly. Nice and relaxed. Again, if you can't sit there for this length of time, just reduce the intensity of the stretch. This should be a generally chilled out one just to get things moving. Keep that glute squeeze, keep that hip pushing upwards. Right, we come up, straighten that left leg now. We're going to do this exact same. We're going to do it the right hand side, so I'm just going to twist around so you can see. So we're going to take that right leg, place it behind us, drop down to the side, make sure we're engaging that glute, pushing the hip forward. And again, we're just going to come down into the deepest position we can do, and then we can also relax into. If you can't get that foot onto the anchor of the knee, you can actually just grab a weight or a dog or another human being and just get them to like hold that down. It does make this stretch a little bit nicer. Now we can just sit here again. We've got 60 seconds. You can play a little bit with your arm position as well. If you lift the arm overhead, it's going to deepen the stretch going over the entire of that anterior fascia. Just generally make sure you're keeping that glute engaged, pushing the hip up and breathing. Just keep holding. Again, just looking for that tension to kind of go over the hip. We're not looking to go deeper, looking to feel that stretch just ease off a little bit. Perfect. We can come up out of that one. We can loosen things off a little bit. I'm just going to come back into like a child's pose position. So just a little bit of opposite, a little bit of flexion. Just wiggle things around for a second. And then we're just going to now work a little bit more intensely on that hip flexor position. So we're going to come forward into a lunge position. We're going to go right leg forward. We're going to work on the left side first because that's what we started with. And we're just going to do some rock and rolls. So for the rock and rolls, it's literally moving from a moderate lunge position. So support on the back leg with the toes. I want to think about trying to be on the little toes the most. So we have like an element of internal rotation. And then from here, you can imagine that this glute is going to drive our hips forward and down into the deepest stretch that we can. The front leg can drop out to the side if we want. Torso remains nice and upright. Hold for a few seconds, keeping that glute engaged, and then come back up. We're just going to do 5 of these per side. And this is literally just like a warm-up. Again, driving that hip forward, using the glute, and coming back up. If you want to further intensify this position, we're just going to raise that left arm overhead and try to pull it back as we get into that bottom position. So remember 5 of these, 3-second pause at the bottom of each rep, so that's number 4. And then we're just going to pause on that last 5th rep. And what we're going to do here is we're going to try and pull your right shoulder back towards your left foot. So we get a little bit of a twist going, pushing this basically left hip down forward. Just for another 5 seconds or so. Come back up, we're just going to swap sides. So right leg goes back on the toes, especially those little toes of the back leg. Left leg goes forward, same thing. Squeeze the glute, tuck the hips. Use the glute to push yourself forward and down. And if you want to, raise that right arm overhead. Come back up. So all the time, think about that glute pushing you down and forward. Nice. That's, I think, 3. 1 more for luck anyway, so 4. We've got 1 more after this. And that 5th one, we're just going to hold that bottom position for about 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so. Just keeping that glute engaged, pushing the hip forward, and then we're going to try and pull that left shoulder back towards that right foot. And come back up. And again, we're going to come into a child's pose position, so we're just going to spend a little bit of time in between each set, because we're doing a lot of extension through that lower back, through those hips. We're just going to spend a little bit of resting time in that opposite position. So this is a flex position. Again, just sat down, chilling out. Just going to hold this for another 10 seconds. Then we're going to move into the not so fun stuff. So we're going to look at actively increasing the contraction of the closing side of the joint to further open up the hip flexor. Now this one is not particularly fun, but if you want to make gains, there's going to be some discomfort. So I'm going to come forward into a lunge position. Right leg forward, left leg back. I'm going to use a foam roller as a support just because I like it in this particular instance. From here, we're going to do a leg curl position. Now, I will warn you that cramp is likely. That is fine. It's an element of just like your muscle not being able to understand how to contract in that position. If you have cramp, shake it off, move out of the position, pause the video if you want to, or alternatively, try to contract harder. It's generally the best way to get rid of the cramp. So, nice and upright. You're going to think about trying to engage the glute first, keep that squeeze in the glute, and then you're going to pull that leg upwards, and we're just going to hold that position. So it should feel like a nice active contraction in the hamstring. You're going to do 3 reps, 5 seconds, trying to lift that foot as high as you can, relax in between, then we're going to swap sides. That's literally it. So, get ready, squeeze the glute, lift the leg, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Stay in that lunge position whilst you're relaxing. Nice and upright as always with the chest. Even if you just lift just the toes literally just off the ground, absolutely fine. Let's do 1 more, lift. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, down. A little bit of rest before the last one. Remember, really think about that glute contraction first before lifting the foot. So lift again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and down. You can come out of that. I'm just going to move the foam roller over to the other side. Switch sides now, so get right leg back, left hip forward, and come forward. And again, same thing, squeeze the glute, lift the leg. So lift, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Again, stay in that stretch position whilst we're relaxing. 2 more reps here, come on. Squeeze that glute, lift the leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, relax down. Just 2 more. Last one, I can't count, last one. Right, squeeze the glute, lift the leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're done. Again, we're going to come very briefly back into this child's pose position, literally just about 10 seconds. wiggle around, get comfortable. And then what we're going to do is a long lunge position. So it's going to be a standing lunge position. And we're just basically going to think about trying to get our feet as far away from each other as possible. So you might want a pretty solid surface to do this on. If it's too slippery, it's going to be really, really hard. So make sure you have some sort of grip with your feet. I'm just going to fold the mat up here. So I'm going to come forward. We're going to start left leg back, right leg forward. We're going to bring ourselves into a standing position. Let that front leg wiggle out. And we're just going to hold this position for 30 to 45 seconds. But over that time, I want you to try and imagine that you're going to push that back leg back, but you're also going to try and curl this front leg forward, so you're going to keep an active contraction on that hamstring. Chest nice and upright. Keep chest facing forward. I'm just going to hold that position. If you're struggling a little bit of balance, feel free to get yourself some support as well. But the main thing is trying to wiggle that foot back and get that lunge as long as possible. So keep holding. Another 10 seconds. Squeezing that glute on the back leg. 3, 2, 1. Very nice. We're just going to swap sides. So, left leg forward, right leg back into a pretty long lunge position to start with. And again, I'm going to try and wiggle that back leg back. Keep that front leg pressing down into the ground. Chest nice and upright. Support if you need to. I'm just going to hold. Keep holding. Another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Nice. We're just going to now come up into a pike position. So we're going to do again a little bit of flexion just to balance out all of this extension. Bend the knees, just allow the torso just to kind of rest on the knees a bit. And then we can just move side to side as we move to the right side. Extend the left leg. Come back to the center. Move to the other side, extend the right leg. Just elephant walks, nice and relaxed, nothing particularly intense here. If you're up here more, absolutely fine. Just bend the legs a little bit more and just sit into it. So keep just moving back and forth. One more per side. And we're going to come down. And before we do the last position, I'm just going to retest that front split, just to kind of give a comparison for comparison's sake. Same leg, same everything. And there you are. So, not particularly a lot of hamstring work done, but that hip extension is way, way easier. So I can get into a much deeper position. But again, you know, I've also done 10 minutes of stretching, so I'll expect that to be the case. Right, we're going to move into the final position. This is where you're going to need a bolster, something comfortable to support yourself. I'm going to do a supported hero pose. They're kind of starting to become a favorite on this channel. We're ending a lot of routines of it. I'm just going to place that kind of underneath the hips, and then the idea here is that we're going to just lean backwards onto it. So in this instance, this wants to be comfortable. We're going to sit here for 60 seconds. We want to be able to be relaxed. So elevate the hips as you need to be relaxed. Then as we go backwards, you also need to elevate the shoulders as you need to be relaxed. A nice way to set this up is a support underneath the hip and then just leaning back onto the sofa, onto a couch. But for me, this is a nice intensity. Figure it out, get yourself bolstered up, cushioned up, get comfortable, and then we're going to lean back and we're just going to sit in this position for, as I said, about 60 seconds. Just going to grab actually a little foam roller for a pillow. And then we're just going to focus on, again, this should be a moderate stretch. And then what we want to think about feeling is our body kind of deepening into the surface that's supporting us. So we're not necessarily looking to go deeper into the stretch. We're just looking for that resistance to the stretch to drop down a bit. So pretty slow breathing, nice and easy. Keep it chilled. If you aren't comfortable, feel free to come out of the position, but try to stay in it kind of as long as possible. Make sure you've got plenty of supports. This should be pretty comfortable, pretty relaxed. Just another 10 seconds. Right, we can come back up. I'm going to grab those supports. We're going to finish up now just with, again, just to counteract all of that extension work we're doing. We're just going to come back into a bit of a child's pose. However you want to do it. Just going to hold this for 10 seconds. Or as, whenever, until it feels good. And that is basically the routine. Bit more of a specific one here. There's many different ways that we could go about approaching this one, but I went for a somewhat more active focus with flexibility in terms of how we might go about using it for activities outside of just stretching. As always, if you enjoyed this video, you can hit that thumbs up button and support the channel. Right next to it is that subscribe button if you want to join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe. Don't miss out on any more future videos. But that has basically been it for this week, guys. I'll catch you in the next episode. Have a strong week and peace.